Hi, welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I'm your host, Jess Dewell. Tuesdays are my favorite day of the week because both in the morning, right now when we live stream, and in the afternoon, we record Voice of Bold Business programs, which means the one we record this afternoon is what you will hear on Friday. So, why do I like Tuesdays so much? Because I learn something every single time I have a conversation for the Voice of Bold Business. And you are ready. You are here. So, listen in live. Hashtag voice actually, that's not it. So let me just try that again. Hashtag VBB radio for Voice of Bold Business Radio. Use that hashtag. Eva is behind the scenes and she will be bringing in your questions and your comments throughout the show. Scott is also here. Thank you so much to Eva and Scott. You make this show possible and getting everything technically ready to go and delivered so that I can spend all of the time and the energy and the focus on the conversation. And what a conversation it's going to be today. You're listening to Build Awareness and Act. This is program 131 of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. And you may be wondering, what does that mean? Build awareness, act. We talk about that a lot on the Voice of Bold Business. This is going to be different. This is already we already go deep. We're going to dig underneath a little bit more and build and understand what we're talking about awareness in regards to trust, responses, communication, because we don't know who we are talking to that comes from an abusive background. We also don't know and maybe have never looked at the full range of emotions and reactions that we have for those of us out there that are listening and watching that have been in abusive relationships. And this matters. It matters because I just learned that April coming up is Abuse Awareness Month. And Abigail is a big proponent of removing all forms of abuse and understanding that it exists and that we can do something about it. And here's what we do. So let me introduce you to Abigail, and then you will meet her right after our open. Abigail Manning has experienced childhood abuse by both of her parents. She's also experienced domestic violence as an adult. She uses firsthand experience with touches of humor to illustrate the challenges of recognizing and understanding abuse. By creating awareness, she moves abuse out of a silent darkness where it starts, where it thrives, and where it has power, into a colorful light of mainstream conversations, stripping it of the oppressive power and creating an opportunity for conversation and more open communication. She sparks compassion in others, and she unites abused and non abused people to prevent as well as end all abuse. We'll be right back after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
All right. So that open is pretty cool too. I always get a chuckle out of it because it moves fast. It has great music, and we can thank Scott for that as well. So thank you, Scott. Abigail, welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio.
Hello, Jess. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And I know it's kind of weird because we're in the same city, yet we're doing this across in two different offices with two different computers to ensure we have the connection that we want for this. Have you done something like this before?
No, not live. So, so I'll be honest, because that's part of the truth is transparency, butterflies in the stomach, but I know I'm in great hands and I'm delighted to be here and just so appreciate this opportunity. And it's exciting. It's exciting.
It is exciting. Now, when I first came up to you to start a conversation, I had no idea your background. I had no idea what you wanted to talk about. I had no idea what kind of a conversation that we would have. And as we started talking and got to know each other, even just a little bit, I was like, I have to know her more. I have to figure out what she does because your attitude is one of aliveness and it is one of opportunity and possibility and inclusion, which
Yes.
is counterintuitive to the bio that I read right before we got to meet you.
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you very much. I delighted in meeting you. And people say it all the time, I don't understand how you can be the person that you are from where you came and what you've experienced. It's just my nature, I think, but I also make it a choice to continue to fight the good fight and then help other people. People ask me, how do you do it? And that's what kind of started all of this.
How do you do it? And choice. What made you decide to make the choice?
Well, for 21 years, I have run my other company, and for 16 years, I was a full time single solo parent. That is quickly coming to a close as my last child is leaving the house. And I'm a mission driven person. I'm not someone who just sits around and points the finger to other people, hoping someone else will resolve a situation. And through my own life experiences, as you mentioned, I realized I had to overcome abuse or it was going to overcome me. And the other driving factor was I had these adorable kids who have been watching me. And so I want to be the best, absolute best mentor that I can be for them to build healthy, strong, amazing lives for themselves and relationships with other people. And then other people started coming to me saying, how are you moving on? How are you doing this? And I explained my own made up theories and codes and cycles and things like that because I had to make sense of it in my own head. And like you said in the bio, I try to throw humor in there and make it simple because it's a very complex topic, but I can't understand complexity. I can understand simplicity. So I try to make it super simple. And that way, I think you can integrate it better into your life.
You know, this concept of this choice that you had to overcome it. There was no other option. It didn't even occur to you that there could be anything else to do. Um, and having spoken to you, it's like this concept of awareness is always around the periphery. Is this something
Yeah.
that you were born with and you figured out that your awareness around abuse happens to just be, high frequency, tuned in? Or was there some change, something that you had to do within yourself to go, I need to be more aware of this? I need to understand what's actually happening.
Yes, yes, and yes. So you scored a perfect 3 out of 3. um, so yes, I was born this way in a lot of ways. I've always been optimistic. I've always been hardworking. I've always had um, over empathy, which is actually not something that we really want to have. We want to be empathetic, but not overly empathetic, where we put everybody else's needs ahead of our own needs so that we can help the situation or make people love one another or be kind to one another. Because as you and I know, we can't make people be things, right? But as
Yeah.
a kid, that's kind of my role that I took on. And then, yes, it's stuff that I have worked very high. And so the high frequency, I like that concept. I've worked very hard at developing these theories and ideas and applying them to myself and moving it forward.
And your family and the relationships that you are encountering and the modeling that you're doing for not only your clients, but your kids, your almost grown kids. And I think that's, even though we're a business show, there is so much that we do at home that when we talk about what we're doing at home, we have a better sense of what we're doing in the workplace because they're less separate. I mean, they're really the
Right,
same. E-
right.
Everything that we're doing, this concept of leaving baggage at the door and productivity and all this other stuff, we're not as productive when we leave stuff at the door. We don't
Mhm.
necessarily have to share it for the whole world to see, but we don't leave it at the door. We're carrying a
Yeah.
piece of it with us. And the more we become compartmentalized, it really feels like the more disconnected that we can be. And then you add the technology and the separation and the metrics that we're working with, and it's easy to forget the people involved. So, do you have some sort of an awareness scale that if somebody came to you and said, I'm interested in looking at myself because I've also experienced abuse, or I'm pretty sure somebody around me that I'm working with or interacting with right now has been abused, and I'd like to better understand so I can communicate more effectively. Do you have a scale that you could share with us around that, or steps
Um,
or step?
yeah. So scale. So wonderful comments. Yes, I completely agree that we carry baggage with us wherever we go. It becomes kind of a backpack that you put on. So when people say, "Well, I can be one way at work or one way at home," you can to some degree, but inside you can't lie to yourself. So if you are carrying that backpack around and you have those same tapes, or what I call purple threads, running through your mind and as part of your ownership of your identity, then you take them to work. You take them to your community groups, you take them into your parenting, you take them subconsciously or consciously every single place that you go. So that's why I work with government, I work with small businesses, I work with large corporations, I work with nonprofits, I work in schools, because it's everywhere. And we want it to be abuse free at home, at work, but mainly within yourself. So that if you can stop it within yourself, each of us do that, it's not going to be around. So one of the steps, as you were saying, or a scale, would be a measuring stick. So when I say abuse too, some people, I like to redefine things so that it's more easily understood. Again, trying to simplify it, and use multiple words. So for some people, the word abuse is really hard. So overt stress, um, adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, that's a standard one that's used also. Hardships, really hard hardships, parents who died when you were young, you grew up in the projects. So the theories that I talk about work for across those scales, in addition to obviously abuse. But some people have a really hard time with that word, and I understand why. And so the first thing is throw away the measuring stick. The measuring stick is what is normal. Well, the problem with that is it's based on your life experiences. It's based on the time period you're born in. I mean, if someone tried to marry you and they said, well, I expect you to be a 1950s housewife, that wouldn't work, right? It's a different, that normal of the 1950s isn't normal anymore.
Yes.
And so it's so limiting if we live by what is normal. And that's one of the first steps that I have is in awareness, is understand that your normal may not be so normal. For me, a normal was my life wasn't as bad as Helen Keller and Anne Frank. And other people, I didn't realize this until many years later. In fact, just a couple of years ago, as an adult, that people were like, that's your normal? And I thought it was a good normal. And so throwing away this preconceived notion of normal based on your current circumstances versus who you are and what abilities you have inside of you and who you dream of yourself to be.
I like, and thank you for sharing. I know it's a very vulnerable thing to talk about what your normal was. We need to hear that though, as a
Hmm.
society and as a community, because um, there are other people who are going to be like, "Oh, really? Really? This is my normal. Why is that? Why
Right.
are people talking about this as like a bad thing? It can always be worse." And that's an
Right. Right.
outlook. That's an outlook that, when we decide to experience versus become a victim of, and I know we both
Hmm.
have some opinions about that. Um,
Hmm.
when we recognize our experience, we become even that much more aware of the people
Yes.
around us and can be a support system, not like, "Ooh, I'm going to take care of you," but a place and space of safety. Uh,
Yes.
and it doesn't have to, we don't have to share all our secrets to still create safe places for people
Hmm.
to be in. And thinking about awareness, there's and this is we're going to come back to my 3 awareness steps because I think it fits in here, and if we don't come back to it, I decided it didn't fit here, and that's
Okay.
totally fine. We have an audience question. John is asking, can we exercise awareness? Oh, actually, let me see. There's a word missing. I'm going to see if I can rephrase it. Um, how can we exercise awareness, and what are some tips to do that?
Okay. So first, as we've kind of just hit on, is get rid of the measuring stick of what is normal. The second is self awareness. So I have a theory that I call purple threads.
Okay.
And if you imagine a sweater being the skin that you wear in this world, I'll try to summarize it for us. And there's holes in it. So a sweater you can knit, right? So purple threads are lies that other people have told you, limiting statements. And the farther back they go in your history, the more vulnerable you were. For example, childhood abuse. If you were told the same thing repeatedly, you are dumb, you are not attractive, you are never going to make it, you are not athletic, no one cares about your opinion. All these things that are purple threads that get woven into you, the more they're woven in, the more over time you believe that the sweater or the skin that you're wearing is purple. And it was never intended to be that way. So those are those lies of unworthiness that it's our responsibility to find them and rip them out. And trust me, it's painful. There are times you're like, how many purple threads can there be? Especially if you've been from childhood to adulthood. But finding those. So I would recommend to him and to others that you find those threads of unworthiness that seem to go through your life. And if you have a hard time identifying them, it's those moments when you feel like you have stomach acid. It's the moment when you feel angry and your fists are clenched. It's the moment you can't stop tears. And it's a bodily reaction. Or if you have a trusted friend, you, like you said, you don't go around telling everybody that wouldn't be healthy. But
Right.
the people that you really trust, ask them. And then you start working, and that's that part of that authentic health that we talk about, is finding those and pulling them out.
Okay. This does coincide with my 3 steps of awareness. So we might just do some co-creation right here on the air. And
Love
if
it.
nothing else, we're going to line them up together. Because the first step in the awareness scale that I tend to use, and it's usually around skills or culture in an organization, is when do things fall apart? What are the moments in time when things fall apart? Or I get done reacting. I had no idea the reaction was happening. I get done and go, "Ooh, I don't feel good now. I just had this crazy reaction." And you're ready to just eat Oreos and ice cream and and you're really drained emotionally. And that's actually something, in communication that is aware. So I like purple threads. And you were talking about how hard it is. And finding them is one thing. And then being able to recognize when they're happening, like what you were talking about, is
Uh-huh.
so
And
important.
not owning it, not owning it. So I owned it. I
Oh,
owned I wasn't smart.
not
I
own.
owned I wasn't physically attractive. I owned people didn't care about me. I owned it as truth, because when you're in a person of power and authority, um, especially as a child, you believe them. So if you're a boss,
Yeah.
an employee believes them. If you're a person of respect, people believe them. And so that's where, so I could get triggered, and then I would try even harder because I was a people pleaser, right?
Yes.
So I would try then even harder. So I kept raising the bar. Well, they'll like me when I do this. Well, that didn't happen because the bar wasn't high enough. That wasn't really a thing. It was a fluke that you went over the bar. So then I'd raise the bar higher, and then I go over that. Well, you should see your other sisters at home, things like that. So no matter how high I kept doing the bar, so the measuring stick can't be that outward source. It has to be from an internal, and that's why. And I know we're not talking about it necessarily today, but that authentic health piece. I'm not judging who I am because judging is always bad anyway, right?
Y-
I'm not deciding if I'm good or bad based on outside influences. I know for who I am and my strengths and weaknesses inside, and I'm okay and good and own it.
I actually think purple threads come before anything that I talk about. And the reason is because until I don't talk about owning things, I'm like, okay, I find myself done and I want to change. I want to have a different outcome. And what you're saying is there's an element of it doesn't matter how much I want, it doesn't matter how much I raise the bar, it
Mhm,
doesn't matter
mhm. Yep.
until I actually own it. And I don't want to say taking a look in the mirror because that usually has a negative impact. However, going, "Yeah, this is what I'm wearing right now."
Although I agree, but I'll tell you, looking in the mirror literally
Yeah.
is a great exercise that I have people do.
Well, let's just switch gears and make looking in the mirror
Okay.
positive, because
Okay.
I know that when you look at yourself in the mirror and make eye contact with yourself for 5 seconds, it only takes
Uh-huh.
5 seconds to fall in love, and you can fall in love with yourself every single day. So, with that concept, what's your exercise?
So my exercise is always based in love, respect, and kindness. And I came up with a family oath when my kids were very, very little. And it was I treat others and myself with love, respect, and kindness. For me, the hardest part was myself. That was, I can pour love on, I have a whole thing on pouring love on other people, and I love doing it. And it makes me so happy and it shifts people. But pouring love on myself is the hardest thing. So when you say you can look in the mirror in 5 seconds, fall in love, I'm so proud of you. But I have people look in the mirror and you start with I am, and then that's how you can quickly find those unworthiness threads. So if you say something like, I am brilliant, and you're like, what? or or you start to cry, or you get that stomach acidy feeling or something like that, or you find you're doing this. I am good. You have to maintain eye contact. And it's a quick, easy way of finding where your weaknesses are in your own thoughts about yourself.
Yeah, I don't say anything when I look myself in the eyes. That's up in the ante there, Abigail.
Hard. It's hard and it's good. And then, so a
Yeah.
lot of times what I do is some people will say, be your own best friend,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And what would you tell your own best friend? So they start with that step because that seems easier. Or if you're a parent, what would you say to your child? Right? I would never say the things that were told to me to my children. And that's part of pulling
Yeah.
purple threads. It's really hard. Like, how could someone have ever said those hurtful, cruel things? And I know now it comes from their own self of unworthiness, their own sense of insecurity and judgment and jealousy, and things of that nature. But it's their own purple threads, is why when people don't own their own purple threads, they love to just put them onto other people. It makes them feel better about themselves. And
So
that's what I want
really,
to stop.
yeah, that's where okay, you took the words right out of my mouth. That the whole purpose of recognizing this within ourselves is because then we learn when it's happening around us. We learn when we're doing it inadvertently and we have
Yes,
no idea we are pushing our insecurities on anybody else. And we can't have trust or transparency when those things are present because they kind of push to the front of the line.
right, right. So it's looking at yourself and then also looking at others. So if
Yeah.
someone else comes up to us, I was just at a women's meeting and they
Okay.
were talking about how women sometimes aren't very nice to other fellow. You talked about this is for business, right?
Yeah.
Women aren't very nice to sometimes other women. It shocks
Was
me.
that the one that we were at?
Yes, but
Was
I
it
didn't know if I should say that.
okay, you can totally say that. I was like, how many
Okay.
times is that coming up for you this month? Yes, Abigail came to the Denver Women's Leadership Roundtable, and we were having this very discussion. So keep going.
Right, right. And so I thought that was normal because that's the way of family of origin that I grew up with. And then when I got out into the workroom, I went off to college and I felt the same way in the sorority house. Now, a lot of that was my own insecurity, but there was a lot of judging. And so one of the things we'd say with throwing out that measuring stick, it's because it's based on judgment, judgment of other people. And that is a slippery slope that does not help anybody. We all fall to the bottom, ourselves, as well as our relationships and potential wonderful relationships with other people.
Mhm.
And so, not being intimidated. So, like when you came up, I loved it. And you said, Hi, I just want to meet you. This is my name. This is what I do. It was wonderful and it was authentic. You owned your own health and you weren't coming over and judging or anything like that. You were just open and saying, I want to know who you are and what do you do?
We share that in common. In fact, this desire to just see somebody else for who they are and how they show up.
Mhm.
And that's going to lead me into this question because I want to talk about authentic health and I would like to build to that. So as part of building, we've been talking about lies and insecurity and judgment. Where does trust fall into all of this?
Trust is key. So if you have been from origin of abuse, you've had experience with it. Trust is the hardest thing to overcome. There's many people who have a really hard time trusting themselves. I should have seen it. If I were smart, I would have known better. Right? That's that shame and the blame that keeps people quiet. It was the purple threads dumped on me that I wasn't smart. So therefore I deserved this. And I couldn't see it. And that keeps you from seeing it. But if you tell a kid you're really smart, you'll always figure it out. I've always told my kids there's at least 3 solutions to every single problem out there. Even if you think there are none, even if you tried everything you possibly can, there's always 3 more solutions. Well, if you tell that to a kid who you're abusing, they're going to figure you out. So you don't do that. You tell them the exact opposite, shame and blame on them. You wouldn't understand. No one would believe you. You're the fault of this anyway. If you were just smarter, you wouldn't have had punishment. So I think I'm going off the track though. So help me get
You are
back on
not
track.
actually. And in fact,
Okay.
one of the things that came up for me, it brought up a very vivid conversation. It was a conversation I've had in just the last 6 months. We were talking about something and I was totally, and I must, I'm like, oh, I did not know I was going to hit that button. And because all of a sudden we're just having this conversation and we must have been talking about something that had passed. And all of a sudden the person I was speaking to says, well, I'm just not going to should all over myself.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
right, which by the way, I love the phrase. The way that it was said, I was like, whoop, wall just went up. What happened? What happened? I hit
The
a
wall
button.
went up with you or
No, no,
her?
no. The person who said it to me, whoosh, that conversation just got shut down. And so here I am like a deer in the headlights going, okay, I thought we were having a good conversation. I had no idea there was something here. And all of a sudden, this is closed.
Yeah.
So, and so we're going to come back to trust because we did kind of go down a rabbit hole away from trust. But when that happens and you're like, oh, okay, so I'm aware of myself and others. I recognize when somebody else might be triggered and they shut down, like in this case, this simple conversation. And I was like, okay, so now what do you do? What it, if it's a social engagement, you can smile and walk away and start talking to somebody else. What if it's a business meeting? What if it's a negotiation? What if it's a really it's a learning experience and you have to have this hard conversation with your kid or your boss or your partner in life, right? How do you keep going when that wall goes up?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you go back to building trust.
Okay.
So trust is actually an acronym that I use to help me. So it's truth, it's respect, it's unity, it's safety, and it's transparency. So if I have done that, I would look at you and I'd be very transparent and say, Jess, I think I said something wrong. I would put the blame probably back on me because I don't want to do something that would upset you. And it makes it easier for you to feel safer with me if I'm not judging. So if I come to you with finger pointing, you shut down, you stopped communicating. What's your problem? We need to make a decision. I'm throwing brick walls and there's no chance, right? Yeah. But if I'm aware, and that's part of we talk about a lot of social cognitive and behavioral therapies, so theories rather. So if I'm aware of your body language and I'm aware that that wall went up, hopefully that's what we're working towards. Authentic health has awareness in it where we can see that we've done it. You can take a step back, right? And say, I'm sorry. Yeah. And you can either identify it straight on. If you can tell that they're really, really not wanting to go there, then you circumvent it and you come back. And out of respect, I'd like to table that and let's move on to this topic.
Mhm.
Or let's come back to this later. Um, and it's always with building unity with the person about I'm on your side, I'm on your team. Even if it's someone you don't necessarily like, I like to play a fun game of finding the spark in them that I really like about that person,
Yeah.
the goodness in that person, because everyone has something good and not everyone is all good and not everyone is all bad. So finding that goodness and then building that trust by connecting on that spark, connecting on that goodness, and not pointing out the flaw, not pointing out how they threw a wall up, but with empathy and kindness, working with them to help them. And that's how we end abuse, is that if that person feels safe, they're not going to turn around, go home and yell at their kid or yell at their neighbor or their spouse. And that's how, when we first started this conversation, we talk about work and home. I don't feel you can separate the two. I think they all flow together, cause and effect.
And the cause and effect may not be instantaneous, is what I just heard you say.
Correct.
So, and I'm going to put myself in I was the one who said, I don't should on myself. Well, one of two things could happen. And I did not have this skill. I just went, "Oh, must tread lightly." So I changed the subject and we continued talking about something completely different. That said though, if I had pushed or if I had or if the person talking to me had pushed back, right? They push back, you're right. I might not take it out on you, the person who caused my well to go up. I'm going to take it out down the road in 10 minutes, in an hour, tomorrow, over the course of time. And
Hmm.
that slow burning fuse is the hardest part to see because we don't see the impact that we have on people when we are unaware of somebody else's fuse.
Right. 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 And what I'm working on is strengthening individuals, right? And
Yeah.
changing our culture. So part of the second step of what you're talking about is changing the culture. So if you were the person that threw up the walls,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
That let's just say, okay, you threw up the walls, right? If I just ignore you and kind of walk away, do you feel safe? Do you
No,
feel loved? Do you feel
no,
heard? Do you feel that you matter?
no. However, I might walk away with a thicker purple thread because I've decided
Yes.
I've protected myself.
Yes. And I'm not showing that again.
Right.
I'm not going to go near that sinkhole again, right? So
Yeah.
you learn to go more withdrawn. So people say, why didn't they speak up? Why didn't they say anything? Because of reactions where they didn't feel safe and loved and trusted and judged and criticized and misunderstood. So if we can change the culture to one, and I've done this. My kids have seen me do this so many times. One of my favorite times was when I was at the grocery store checking out, and it was an elder woman who was doing it and taking my groceries through. And I could tell she just had this about her. And I said, "How's your day going?" And I always make eye contact, so being direct, being transparent, saying, "I really do care about you." And she said, "Not so good. I feel beat up." And the way she said it, and she looked at me with a little fear, a little like, "Oh, why did I say that?" And I said, "I come from childhood abuse and domestic violence. I know that feeling of being emotionally beaten up." And she stopped and she looked at me, and my kids both took a step back, like, "Okay, here goes mom. Like, let's just give her space."
Mhm.
And kindness, because it can't be rushed, right? Like, well, what's your problem? You know?
Right.
And so I looked at her and I just think like loving thoughts towards her. And she said to me, "Well, today's my dad's birthday, and I really don't want to have to go because he was a police officer, and every day he'd come home from work and he would throw my brother and me against the wall. And I really don't want to have to see him." And I said, "You don't have to. You only owe it to yourself to be happy and healthy. And if he can't honor and respect that, you don't have to." And she said, "I've never told anybody ever." And I said, "Well, now you're on your first step."
Yeah.
So in that authentic moment, I helped someone shift. I
You
saw her,
also
I noticed her.
You did, and you asked a question that allowed connection to occur. It's not the
Right,
everyday question that you're gonna get that you really don't want the answer to.
right.
And when somebody answers one of those questions in a way that's not quick and fast, when
Mhm.
they get shut off, they're never gonna talk to you again.
Right,
We have done the opposite of unity. We have done the opposite of each
right,
of the steps of trust. There is no trust there, and no
right,
trust will now be built. That
right,
has been basically closed off forever.
right. And so even if
Mhm.
10 more people come behind
Yes.
and offer and offer and offer, no way, no way, no way, no way,
Mhm.
and that could be 10 more years of your life. So you have to own it yourself and you have to be brave to step out. And that's hard. That is hard. It is hard. So people take the safe, easy way of just kind of burying it. But long term, that's not safe. That's not easy. What's safe is walking free and true in the world, speaking your own voice.
You are listening to Build Act. No, actually, it's the other way around. All the right words in the wrong order. This is Build Awareness and Act with Abigail Manning. And you're listening to us speak about this. And I'm really glad you shared that example, Abigail, because I would like to point out there are times we're just kind of doing that social check-in. We have this thing and somebody will, and we don't have time. We don't have time. We really don't want an answer. Yet all of a sudden, somebody goes, "Oh, this is the person for whatever reason. I'm going to tell the truth
Yeah.
right here."
Yeah.
And if we're the one that's busy and we're the one in a hurry, what I heard you just say, Abigail, is that we could prevent that person from having enough courage for who knows how many more years to step up.
Mhm.
And so if
Yep.
somebody's going to open up to us, it is almost a duty, a duty of humanity to stop and listen. We all have 5 minutes. We all have 5 minutes.
Right. 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 She was still checking out the stuff and the person
Sure.
was bagging. It didn't even take me 5 minutes.
That's what
It didn't take
and
five
I love
extra
that. Mhm.
right? It was just authentic connection with someone else and truly, truly caring about other people. And why? Because I've been there. We've all had
We've all had
hardships.
that.
We've
Mhm.
all had disappointments. We've all had grief that knocks us to our knees. And if you haven't, I want to know what you're doing.
Right? I know. Ooh, we need to know you. Exactly. And I think that authentic connection, it comes back that one of the things that I run into in organizations that I work in when we're talking about culture and we're talking about organizational culture and inviting everybody to the party and creating shared meaning. Well, in the case of we're open and honest with each other. Yet if every single interaction we have within that organization of being open and honest with each other is, "Hi, how you doing? Okay, good. See you later." There
Mhm.
is a contradiction there, and the actions are speaking louder than words. And then when things break, people are really confused. "Oh no, we got this culture thing. Oh no, everybody's here." Yet you come in and you observe, and there's a whole bunch of awareness that has to happen, circling all the way back to the beginning, Abigail. And you were talking, so we're talking about awareness as part of authentic health. We're talking about trust as part of authentic health. And is it possible to rebuild trust with somebody when you've lost it?
I think so. I think so. I think it's a very, very tricky one. But I think that directness, so transparency to me is directness. We teach people to be direct, direct eye contact,
Yeah.
you know, direct attention, not checking your phone, not yeah, 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 but really listening to people and then answering it very clearly. So the thing that abusers do, or predators, or narcissistic, or sociopaths, or just abusive type of people, they don't really connect. I'm sorry. Sometimes I have so many thoughts in my head going at the same time. Um,
Welcome to my world. It's all good. This audience is totally comfortable with that.
I often had three thoughts in my head, and I'm trying to learn to slow down so that I can actually do all three. It's much easier if I can write because then I can go back and edit. So I guess I'm just going to move on to one of them. It's
Sure.
that building the trust that you talked about. It's being authentic and direct. And when you know someone is healthy versus unhealthy, you can overcome it. So if I had offended you,
Hmm.
um, I can come back to you and I can say, Jess, I'm really sorry the other day. I said something, I thought it was funny, and I realized it kind of threw you under the bus, and that's not okay. And I'd like to make it up to you. And then I follow through. So if it was in front of a group, I need to make amends in front of that group. The next time the group is together, I need to stand up and say, model the behavior, right? Change the culture. I need to say, before we start this meeting, I really want to extend apology to Jess. Yesterday, I said something that I thought was kind of funny because we know that sometimes spreadsheets are hard, but it really wasn't okay. Jess is a fantastic person who really works hard at what she does, and she does a marvelous job. And I just wanted to acknowledge that that was my bad. Will you trust me in the future?
I will at least listen to you if I
Yeah.
was that person. I'd be
Right,
like,
right?
there might be
Well,
something
you're like,
here.
okay,
Yeah.
right? So the next meeting you go into, you might be nervous and sensitive, but if I'm sincere, I won't ever do that again. And
Yes,
over
and that's
time,
the thing. Over
yes.
time, walking the walk, doing what you
Hmm.
say you're gonna do. It's my bad. I apologize. And
Right,
not making it okay to continue the excuse and apologize every time, but to actually change the way somebody is acting, I think
right,
is where you're going.
right. Exactly. And if you look at their behavior, not just their words, that's the problem. Is a lot of times, me included, for so many years, I looked at the words and the
Well,
words. I'm a
there's
word
safety in
person.
that. In
Yes,
terms
and they were
when
beautiful.
yeah.
They were beautiful words, and they were either pushing and pulling on those purple threads, so I believed them, or they were the exact opposite of the purple threads, and they were the words I always wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so wonderful. That's so great. Yay, I finally can be this, 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 and this, whatever your unworthiness things are, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't follow through. They were just words. So you have to make sure the behavior matches the words. So if I said I'm sorry and I'm going to make it right, I'm going to apologize in the next group meeting, and then I don't do it, you have your answer. You can't trust me.
That's right. That's right. We have another audience question. Beth is asking, she's making a statement and a question. I'm very transparent and understanding as a person. However, I often feel like a fool. People think of my qualities as weaknesses. Am I doing something wrong?
Oh, I would love to know what the qualities are. I don't
Okay,
think you're
Beth,
doing, come
come
on,
back.
Beth, tell us.
Should we table it for a minute and see if she responds back?
If she can tell, then we can be more specific about it. So being
Perfect.
a fool, one, that could be a purple thread. Why would you feel like you're a fool? If you're smart and intelligent and everything. So I would just ask a couple questions around the question, why do you feel like a fool? Is it other people saying you're ridiculous? Well, maybe that person is abusive. Or if you're like, no, I feel like a fool, then ask the questions why. Why do I feel like a fool? If I'm smart, then why, how could I ever feel like a fool? Well, if feeling like smart, looking in the mirror and saying, I am smart, if she can't look at herself in the face and look at it and not feel weird, sick to your stomach, whatever, then maybe those are things that she could work on, right?
Mhm.
And then look to see who you're around and what are those characteristics that that would be really helpful if we could know what those are.
Okay, we'll see if she is listening and willing to share. Um,
Okay.
so this is interesting because what I just heard you say in this example, answering this question, is that there's ownership for everybody. It's not just
Mhm.
the person who's got the feeling that has to do the work.
Mhm.
It's not just the person who might be causing the feeling that might be totally oblivious. It's, is it mine? Is it not mine? Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit more? How can we, I'd like more words around that. And maybe it's a repeat almost just for my own self here. But I want to know, how do I know what I should own? And how do I know what's not mine
Perfect.
to own?
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So throwing away your measuring stick of what is normal, pulling your own purple threads and filling them with things of worthiness. And then the next step, I think, of what you're asking is that checklist or that scale originally you were asking about.
Mm.
And I talk about healthy versus unhealthy behavior.
Mhm.
Okay. So what is healthy, what is not? And it can't be based on your measuring sticks, right? It has to be made based on more of a standard. So here's where it's tricky. So I'm going to give you a quick definition of how we define abuse in all circumstances, from bullying to domestic violence to child abuse to neglect. It's where one person uses manipulations to gain and maintain power and control over this person over here. Okay. So what is unhealth? Unhealth can be small. It always starts small in abuse and it always grows big and it's always repeated. So the definition is repeated mistreatment. So it always is repeated. And we can start seeing it with more clarity. Again, don't look at the behavior or the words, look at the behavior. So is the person you're talking about, are they intimidating or are they impressive? Are you scared to be with them or are you safe and can't wait to go to work and be with that person? Are they judgmental and critical? Are they encouraging and open and accepting? Like, I'm not sure that that will work from a scientific perspective, but I like where you're going. Let's keep working on this rocket idea that you have. So it's encouraging. Is it exclusive or inclusive? And those are those kind of critical thinking skills that we can put into place that take out the measuring stick of our past experiences, of our purple threads. Then we start looking to see if it's repeated. And so if you're talking about work or home, it can be any of the big five, and it's not always just one. So it's either psychological or emotional, verbal, physical, sexual, or financial. And they'll bounce around between the two. And that's how someone who's truly abusive gets away from it, gets away from being called out on it, because it's so complex. But if you keep it simple, is this person blaming others? Is this person a person who takes responsibility for themselves? If you start doing that clear checklist, it's much easier to see the patterns, and that's what you're looking for, are patterns of behavior.
So, where does rationalization fit into this? Because when we don't want to face the truth, we are so,
Mhm.
no matter how much we're working on our own awareness of whatever we're working on in any aspect of life, we're really good at rationalizing. How do you find
Yeah,
rationalizations to be able to call them out?
yeah. So rationalizations, sometimes I do better if I have like a specific. So if there's a lot of you should have, you could, you need to, you must. I call it finger pointing. It's blame, it's shame. So anytime the person is trying to dump it on you and make it your problem, your fault, you never could do math. It is shocking you got this done, right? You point the finger back at what's the topic, what is important, Is it that I'm dumb? Or is it back on this table? So I love watching when news people interview someone and they're really good at
Yeah.
finger pointing. And I've watched even the highest end professional news reporters get all flustered. One was this debate going back and forth. And finally, this is the abuser. And this is the news reporter who was very calm, very like no poker, I mean, total poker face. The voice was steady. And they kept coming back with rational things like, no, 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 don't put it on that group. Don't put it on that group. This is what you said. We're going to bring it back to you. Point the attention back on the person who's doing it. That's what they don't want. They don't want the attention on them. They want to keep shame and blame on other people. So he said a flat statement that was perfect. And this person had nothing to say, the abuser, and he said, I don't like your tone of voice. I thought it was so funny because he ran out of his whole bag of tricks. And this guy, first of all, your tone of voice doesn't really matter if you're having kind of a debate. I mean, he wasn't being a jerk. He was on TV and there was
Right.
no tone. He was so professional. There was no tone to his voice. And the look on his face was like, so that's that accountability is put it back on the person who's trying to push it on everybody else's fault. That's why I talk about, do they take responsibility or do they blame others? Do they try to intimidate you or do they try to say that I'm on your side and impress you with their steadfastness?
Okay, everybody who's listening, do you see why I'm excited to have Abigail here? Because any skill we talk about, anything that we talk about in relationship to what it means to be bold business, we're like we're looking at our heart from our heart's perspective here,
Mm.
and we all, I mean, it could have been somebody at school, it could have been, who knows,
Mhm,
somebody in college, it could have been a professor, it could have been a boss from 25 years ago. It doesn't matter. Those things affect us. And
mhm.
what I'm learning is that the things that I really don't want to look at, that the things that I've totally blocked out from my memory, are the things that need a little bit of a closer look because I'm limited by them. And I'd like to challenge everybody who's listening to do the same. Oh yeah, I don't really need to think about that anymore. It's past. Is it really past? Is my question to you. How much more could you do if that really is a purple thread that needs to be pulled out using Abigail's example here? And you know, this brings us full circle. We've been talking about all the elements of authentic health. So tell us, what is authentic health and how do we continuously move toward it and embrace it?
Fabulous. So it's all the things that we've already talked about, right? And the things that you just mentioned, because you're going to carry it with you. You're going to wear that sweater and you're going to think you're purple when you were never meant to be purple. And then what I love in the whole theory is there's a flip a dip. And if you are, purple can be a beautiful color. So we're not anti anything at this house, right?
Yep.
So then the next step of authentic health is self awareness. And so it's not self pity, right? But it's an honest, steadfast self confidence, self awareness, self assured. So, self, I just came up with an acronym and I'm coming up with all these illustrations for these different things because I'm a visual person and I love visual. And I think it helps people when I show them kind of doodle what I have in my head, then they're like, okay, so we're coming up with all of these illustrations for these. So, ultimately, if you have authentic health, you have a solid sense of self. And that is you're secure, you're ethical, you're loving, and you're fearless. When you have those things, you have your authentic ability to move into this world and take on challenges. And I love seeing people move forward and keep taking steps. And people always say, where do I start? And I say, just take a step, just start. And it's a choice to get up and keep moving forward and keep taking a step when you get knocked down, when you get insecure, when those purple threads come back again. Because even after you pull them, honestly, Jess, there's more. Because, like you said, it could have been a boss from a long time, but maybe other people reinforced that purple thread along the
Right.
way, or you looked for that reinforcement so you could stay in your lane, right? You could stay in that role. So, as a child, from a family of origin, if you were the smart one, or you were the strong one, or you were the silly one, people tend to stay in that lane unless they know that they have the ability to be anything and everything they want. And you can be all three of those things. You don't have to be one or the other. So part of authentic health is also not thinking mutually exclusive about yourself and your abilities and who you are and what you can do. And it's really ownership, because when you can own, going back to that definition of abuse, when you can own your own power and control, no one can take it from you. No one. You own it. So part of authentic health is owning your own power and control, and your personal responsibility will get you there.
My brain has like 10 things trying to come out of my mouth at once. Remember? I was like, no problem. This is
Yeah.
normal on the Voice of Bold Business Radio.
I do that all the time.
So not only it's up to us, not only that, not only we have to draw new boundaries in terms of pushing back where pushback is necessary. I will own what I must own and nothing else. Yet there's an element of acceptance in that. I don't want to push it away violently. Well, maybe I do. However, I'm also trying to set a new culture. So whether I'm reacting, whether I'm responding, whether I'm building my own self-awareness for my own purple threads, I still would like to be conscious and kind to other people in the space of grace, because I don't know about you, but some of this feels like, when you hit your funny bone and then you have to walk in and give a presentation. And you can barely think because your funny bone is insanely hurting and you're like, what am I going to say? What am I supposed to do? Who are these people? And you still have to be kind and competent and straightforward. And I would say it's like that. It hijacks your brain.
It does
And
hijack your brain. Yeah.
and so being able to recognize, oh, look, I'm hijacked. And then I'm using funny bone for on purpose. Oh, my funny bone is hijacking my brain. Okay, I can at least say that. You guys, I need a minute because it's time to start. And I can't think yet because it's still way over here. And you were talking
Yes.
about tabling it.
Yes.
When you
Yes.
can't, there's a way to bring something else around. And when we plan well, when we plan well for a situation, that doesn't mean we have to go by the plan. It means we're prepared for basically anything. So we can throw it up, see what happens, and maybe the order changes. Maybe there was going to be a question and answer in the presentation I was going to give. I might go, okay, I've got this funny bone here. All I'm going to be able to do is write down what you're thinking. So what questions do you have before we begin? And I would get them on a board or I would get them on a piece of paper, because it gives my stuff that's hijacking my brain, right? This actual physical feeling, a chance to dissipate, and I can come back in and now we can keep going, which you never know. Things happen on purpose, even when they're out of control. And there was a time, it was not my funny bone, but it was something like that. I got a really bad phone call right before I had to go into a meeting, and I
Right.
switched up everything I needed to do. And it actually turned out better than anything I could have thought of because of the way that I was able to respond in the moment. And
Right.
so that's something I wanted to just leave people with, is that the more we plan, the more we think about it. Doesn't mean we have to have a plan to follow, especially if we don't like to follow plans. But we know we're covered in almost any situation. So we know when we look at ourselves, we're ready to face some sort of a bully that may appear out of nowhere. Like, what just happened? Kind of thing. So I want to
Right.
know from you, why is it bold? Why is it bold to honor a difficult situation, a lot of stress, abuse of some kind, and use it to become more of who we are? Why is that bold?
It's really bold because it's scary. It's hard. It's work. It's vulnerability. It's putting yourself out there. It's a possibility someone could reinforce those purple threads in you. And so I did write down this time when listening to you. I loved it. So I wouldn't get off track. Part of our authentic health, it's a 3-hour workshop. So I'm trying to throw out a bunch of the big
Cool.
nuggets to it. One of it is the 3-count breath. So if you breathe in, because you slow your heart rate down, there isn't a bioneurological and your brain gets hijacked and all that. I loved your example of that. Sometimes we use crocodile versus owl brain and all of that. But the 3-count breath is you breathe in for 3, reminding yourself, I have my own power. You kind of hold it for 3 seconds. I'm going to maintain my composure and my control, and I kind of get centered. And then I blow it out for 3 seconds to release any kind of purple threads of I'm not going to do well, or whatever those unworthiness tapes are that you have. So that's the first step of your authentic health, is you can't get hijacked. So when you come from abuse, you tend to go to fight, flight, or freeze. So for example, I just taught a sexual harassment class to a room full of senators in Colorado. And one of them was, well, if you hug somebody and they just stand there, I said, she's in freeze mode. That's not a yes mode. That's not consent. That's not mutual. It's fight, flight, or freeze. And they went, oh, well, that would make sense. So we have to not let our bodies hijack us, right? So there's different tips and techniques. One of my favorite is the 3-count breath, because it kind of gives you back that reminder of center. And it does some things like slowing down your heart rate, gives you something to focus on that's positive. It gives you your power back. And then we go to HBL, and HBL are healthy boundary lines. And those are the things you have to practice. You have to know what they are, where you stand, what's over the line. And then, for example, if someone's coming up to you and you're not a hugger, you come back very calmly. Like you said, you don't want to be violent. You come back very calmly with a smile and you say, I prefer a handshake. And you've set the boundary line. And if they continue to hug you, you can take a step back and say, I prefer a handshake. And then you've really, really established it, right? And then the other part of the authentic health is exactly what you touched on. I love that, the synergy. So we teach people to respond and not react. Because if you react, again, you're fight, flight, or freeze, and you're not going to think straight. It's not going to go well. Versus responding are those things that we just talked about, where you know what you stand for, you know what your purple threads are, and you know you've already practiced your response. So like a firefighter or a police officer, you can get into a dangerous situation and you can be very calm and know that you can respond appropriately.
I was practicing the breathing while you were doing
Oh,
this, not because I needed to, but because I'm like, this is a really good practice, even when I'm calm and in
yeah,
control.
yeah.
You really can get centered. And it's amazing when we take a few breaths to clear our brain. And all right, everybody, this is here. We are going to not only have show notes for this, we're going to find a couple of resources of Abigail's to also include in the show notes, whether it's video or articles, because there is so much here. And I want you to be able to practice this. I want you to be able to recognize this not only from our own personal work as leaders today, also because it is our responsibility as leaders of other people to build and change and set an expectation of inclusiveness and safety for everybody that we work with. This is a responsibility we have as part of our society today. We know it's moving in that direction. It is very clear there is work to be done here. And you heard it, it doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take a lot of effort. It does take constant vigilance, though, and conscious awareness. You are
Mhm.
listening to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I was just talking about the show notes, which you will find at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P131. That's voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 131. You can also search Abigail Manning on the site. You can also search Build Awareness and Act. All right, this is the time. Who can you share this information with that needs it right now? And whether we were able to answer your question completely, whether questions have come up, you will be able to find contact information for Abigail on the site as well. Because if you have a specific question, this is something I know about her, having connected with her personally, is that she is there to answer a question. She is there to help you figure out the right question to ask yourself for the work to do, and do it in a safe and secure way. And if you don't feel comfortable with Abigail, you're comfortable with me. I can get you an answer and I can send it back to you too. It's one of those cool things about having a great network of people to build on and build from. Don't forget to subscribe to Voice of Bold Business Radio. You have so many options, and all the options are at the voiceofboldbusiness.com website. I want to make sure, though, we want you to rate us and respond about what you've learned on iTunes and on YouTube. We are working on building our followings there so that we can get this information to the people who need it. And it takes your help and your effort to make that happen. So thank you for that. Also, we're talking about things that are pretty vulnerable. We're like, oh my gosh, really is Jess talking about this? Well, yes, because we're people and we're doing business. And what it means to be an effective leader, what it means to lead, is incredibly important in the world that we are in today. And we're defining it by the actions that we take. So we want to know from you. It's up to us to build the empathy. We want to know what you're going to do to build awareness and act.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.